Namo Buddhaya, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. You are already logged into the Subhangjaya Buddhist Association Facebook Live. To those of you who have been sharing with your families, friends, thank you very much for passing the Dharma talks to them. For those who have not done so, proceed to share with your families, relatives, and friends. Just copy the link and share with your WhatsApp groups. In the meantime, please ensure that your Wi-Fi internet connection is good. To those who have just joined us, Namo Buddhaya, and welcome to this evening's 6th online Friday Dharma sharing. We're going to have another interesting evening. Sadhu to you for choosing to tune in to tonight's talk instead of other activities. You may now wish each other in the comments box. Example, say sadhu to our speaker and to our friends. And later, also give us the like or thumbs up. Tonight's Dharma sharing is Breaking Myth number 4. Life is not all suffering. This is the 4th session by Dr. Punna. If you have questions regarding the talk, you may type your questions in the comment box. So before we proceed, let us pay respect to the Triple Gem. Dang Pujemi, Dhammang Pujemi, Sanghang Pujemi. Brothers and sisters, let us proceed to take our 3 refuges and observe the 5 precepts. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Anatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu vichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Usavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya macca pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, Sadhu, sadhu. Brothers and sisters, we shall now proceed with the Dharma sharing by Dr. Punna. I shall head over to Sister Liming, who will tell you more of the speaker.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Brother Chuan. Good evening and Sukihotu to all brothers and sisters in the Dharma and to all viewers who are tuning in tonight on Facebook and YouTube. Tonight is our fourth session in our Breaking Myths Dharma sharing series by Dr. Punna Wong, entitled Life is Not All Suffering. So for the last 3 Fridays, Dr. Punna Wong has been our guest speakers on our online Friday Dharma sharing session, which have garnered many interested viewers, not just in Malaysia, but from abroad as well. So in case you have missed any of our previous sessions, you can still watch them, the recorded talks, on our SJBA Facebook page. So let me now introduce our distinguished speaker for tonight, whom we are very honored to have him accept our invitation, Dr. Punna Wong. He's currently an associate professor in internal medicine at Monash University, Malaysia, based in Johor Bahru. He's an established Dharma speaker who has been regularly sharing Dharma in Malaysia, Singapore, Jakarta, Manila, Ho Chi Minh City, and Bangkok for the last 2 decades. He had also been invited to speak at the 3rd, 7th, and 8th Global Conference on Buddhism. And due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, he has now shifted his focus on sharing Dharma online via Zoom, Facebook, WhatsApp, and even YouTube. Dr. Wong has just recently published a Dharma e-book comprising a collection of sharings on the theme of Breaking Myths, just launched on Malaysia Day on September 16, which happens to be the theme of our Dharma sharing sessions. And the launch of the hard copy version of this book will be held this month on 18th of October. So without further ado, I shall now hand over to Dr. Punna Wong for his Dharma sharing tonight. Over to you, Dr. Punna. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Thank you, Sister Liming. And before I proceed, may I wish everyone of us here in Malaysia, Southeast Asia, and overseas, may you be well, may you be happy. For us in Malaysia, the pandemic has gotten worse, so let us always remember that we need to be careful and that we need to care for each other by being very, very clean and obsessively cleaning our hands and not touching our face. So today is the 4th part of my sharing before we take a break. And tonight I am breaking a myth which is very, very common, even within our Buddhist circle. So tonight's theme is Breaking Myths, Life is Not All Suffering. Now, when I was in primary school, we actually had religious classes then, and in our primary school book, we do have a page on the various religions each. And I remember distinctly that that page which introduced the Buddha's teaching, introduced the Buddha's teaching as primarily that life is suffering. I do not know how many of you had gone through this, but I'm sure many of you would have been either told or you had read the same thing. Now, even as a child in primary school, I found that statement very unsatisfactory, as it was obvious to me that there is a lot of happiness. And no matter how brief or transient, I was not suffering though during those moments of happiness. Just like I am quite sure that most of us here in the audience are quite comfortable. We are not exactly in pain or in distress right now. So I was confused and honestly quite put off by that statement in my schoolbook. I often ask this multiple choice question when I share with regards to the first noble truth. I will ask the audience, in the first noble truth, the Buddha taught that life is suffering. Please answer true or false. And most times, at least 2/3 of the audience will raise their hand when I say, how many say the Buddha taught this in the first noble truth? At least 2/3 of the audience would put up their hands and say that the Buddha taught that life is suffering. Now, this is a myth, because the Buddha did not say that life is suffering. And the first noble truth is very commonly misunderstood. And even many Buddhists are trapped in this wrong and gloomy view. Now, Buddhists claim that they know the way to happiness. If they honestly and really know the way to happiness, they should be the happiest people on earth. Otherwise, you're not living your claim. What did the Buddha say in the first noble truth? And I'm going to read it to you line by line. The Buddha said, now this, monks, is the noble truth of Dukkha. I do not wish to translate the word Dukkha here, because Dukkha means far more than the word suffering. We shall just leave it as Dukkha. The Buddha said, birth is Dukkha, aging is Dukkha, death is Dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair are Dukkha. Association with the unloved is Dukkha. Separation from the love is Dukkha. Not getting what you want is Dukkha. And he summarized it by saying, in short, the 5 clinging aggregates are Dukkha. Now, Dukkha means far more than the English word suffering implies. For lack of a better word or understanding, the early translators used the word suffering. And we are stressed. We are stuck with it. We are stuck with that word because it's in common consciousness. But Dukkha actually means far more than the word suffering. Dukkha also refers to stress or discomfort or disease or emo or unhappiness or I don't feel good, or I feel anxious. All this is encompassed in the word Dukkha. And the second line is very important. In short, whatever you cling to, our aggregates is how we perceive the world, how we label the world as whatever it is we label it. It is our manner of perception of how our mind perceives that this is Liming, this is Brother Chuan, this is Subanjaya. That's how our aggregates surface. And as long as we cling, the Buddha said, upadana, pancha upadana khanda. As long as you cling to any of these perceptions, that will give rise to dukkha. So please note, the Buddha did not say that life is suffering. This slide on the bottom, I actually took from the internet. This is what I wrote. The Buddha did not say that life is suffering. The Buddha actually classified it very specifically in the First Noble Truth. Birth, he said, aging, sickness, death, dissociation, etc. All these are the broad categories of situations whereby the Buddha very specifically mentioned as either giving us stress, disease, or actual suffering, physically or psychologically. And this is also found in the internet. You know, in the internet, there's this site that identifies the common things that goes around that is attributed to the Buddha, but it's wrong. And this author will go around putting fake on it. And this I took from there. So let us be very clear what the First Noble Truth teaches us. Because if not, we are going to grossly misunderstand the Buddhist teaching. So you cannot generalize it to life is suffering, because there is obviously also a lot of mundane happiness in life, even though it may not be a permanent state of happiness. When we gather in fellowship, when we have a meal, or we gather for a drink, of course in COVID-19 that's a bit difficult, but before that, and hopefully after this goes down, we are happy in fellowship. When we sit together and share, we are happy. Yes, such states are impermanent and hence short-lived and even unreliable. But it does not negate that much mundane happiness is still present. And we certainly do not want to frighten away people new to the Buddha Dharma by telling them right at the very first contact, life is suffering. You're going to put away a lot of people and misrepresent the Buddha's teachings. Life is suffering in Pali would be jivatam dukkham. You will not find this statement in the canon. And I repeat, the Buddha states clearly in summary, pancha upadana khanda dukkha. Our khandas is the means in which we perceive our world and ourselves. Pancha upadana, pancha 5, clinging or attachment. As long as you cling to that perception, you cling to that label, you are going to have distress, emotional stress, and dis-ease. So clinging to our perception of forms, feelings, perception, volition, consciousness is dukkha. And to leave out clinging is to miss the very important teaching of the Buddha. Now, the Buddha, in fact, repeatedly cautioned his students about the dangers of addiction to sensual gratification, which is the essential happiness or pleasure as a result of the stimulation of our 6 senses. For example, many Malaysians love durians. So when you eat durians, you feel happy. You like the smell, you like the taste, you like the creamy texture. It's a form of sensual gratification of our senses. And we feel happy when we eat it. Of course, it is short-lived happiness. Of course, it's going to end very fast. But it is a sensual gratification, a mundane form of happiness. And of course, mundane happiness is plentiful 2,600 years ago. And manifold now in this era of instant communication and information technology. So when you say, oh, I love fish, what do you mean when you say you love fish? Do you actually love that fish? No. You say, I love fish. It's because when you eat fish, that fish that you are eating has sensual gratification for your senses, which makes you happy. So you say, oh, I love Hokkien mee. It's the same thing. You don't actually go around and hug Hokkien mee, but you say, I love Hokkien mee, because when you eat Hokkien mee, it makes you happy as it stimulates your senses. Similarly, boy A tells girl B, oh, I love you so much. Why does boy A tell girl B that he loves her so much? That's because when he is with her, she makes him feel happy. Vice versa. It's a very conditional form of love. It must come with 300 conditions to be fulfilled. But it is still a form of happiness, which all of us experience. Now, the Buddha's awakening at the age of 35 led to the end of his dukkha, of mental stress. That's why when he became awakened at the age of 35, he said he entered nibbana. But his body continued, as any physical body will have, to have the pain that is associated with aging and decay, until he entered parinibbana at the age of 80. And that is when he will not be reborn. That is when he will not have another physical body. And that is truly the end of both mental and physical pain. But the Buddha's mind was always at peace, happy and calm, freed from the stresses of daily life, emotional cravings, wants and dislikes, despite whatever physical pain associated with the decaying body is present. His mind was already freed from psychological stress and pain. He knew the way to negotiate the world, live the world, and be happy. If you look at the Chinese word for dharma, for fa, you look at the word fa. It's a very interesting word because on the left side is 3 dots of water, and on the right side, on my right, is the word chu, to go out. When you learn the Dhamma, when you understand the Dhamma, when you apply the Dhamma, you are like water flowing around rocks and obstacles without resistance. And that, when we apply the Dhamma that we have learned in our daily lives, our lives become smoother, happier, because we flow like water around obstacles. Now, as I mentioned, the Pali word dukkha, like the Malay word dukkha, we use it as in dukkha citta, citta being an emotion, dukkha citta being an unhappy, disease, something you do not like. That word dukkha implies an unreliable state which is incapable of satisfying. It gives you dukkha citta. It's always changing, incapable of truly fulfilling us and making us happy permanently. So in that specific sense, one may say life has dukkha as its common denominator. Because even when we have happiness, that happiness is transient, that happiness is impermanent, and it changes. But the English text, life is suffering, in this context, would certainly be misleading, because I am sure every one of us in this audience would have experienced much happiness in your life. But where there is happiness, inbuilt within is also dukkha. And that is because everything is impermanent, changeable, and unstable. And instability leads to the unreliability and the dukkha of life. So there is suffering in life. That's undeniable, an accurate description. While life is suffering distorts the profound teaching of the Buddha. Now, a healthy body cannot last forever. It will gradually become weak, old, sick, and die. And when changes come, dukkha arises because we mentally resist these changes and we attach to what we want it to be, what we mentally imagine it to be, instead of what it has become. But think of all the times when changes was in the direction that we like. And then we would have welcomed it. No dukkha. We would have accepted it and welcomed it. No dukkha. And this is important for us to realize. This insight is important to realize. So the Four Noble Truths explains the cause of the arising of dukkha very elegantly. You see, I refrain from using the word suffering. I keep on using the word dukkha because it means much more than suffering. So the Four Noble Truths explains the cause of the arising of dukkha very elegantly. And these are our emotions of craving or tanha as specified in the Second Noble Truth, and clinging, attachment, upadana, as specified in the First Noble Truth. Remember what I read to you just now. Pancha upadana kanda dukkha. The 5 clinging aggregates will give to suffering. And in the Second Noble Truth, tanha is mentioned. So when you have insight, when you have wisdom, what if you can deal with all that happens to us without these emotions of craving and clinging or attachment, then what gives rise to dukkha will be far less, maybe even not present anymore. Will you then not be very happy Buddhist? So even though we may not be able to achieve this completely, if we can lessen our emotions of craving and lessen our attachment, you are already becoming more happy. And this is the ultimate secret to happiness. That secret to happiness that Buddhists claim that they know. Now, we cannot change the external environment or even our own bodies, but we can change our attitude. And with a change in attitude, you can be very, very happy. All right? Keeping our precepts, for example. We just chanted the precepts just now. And the Buddha had taught us that just keeping the precepts alone is already very meritorious. And it is something morally good, it's completely secular, nothing religious at all. Pure human values. And they are skillful. A mind saturated with the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion is a mind that is unskillful, what we call defiled, full of defilements, a mind that is ill or sick or in bondage. In other words, a mind that suffers. On the other hand, a mind that is free from the three poisons, even if it is partially, is a mind that is now more skillful, more morally good, a mind that is more pure, a mind that is well, a mind that is in freedom. In other words, a mind that is happy. You do not have, the Buddha said, the guilt of conscience or the fear of consequences if you merely keep your precepts. And remember, the 5 precepts that all lay people are encouraged to keep are actually purely secular. There is nothing religious in there at all. It's a completely humanistic values. So what prevents us from experiencing happiness? What prevents us from experiencing true happiness are these same 3 poisons. Greed. As long as we have endless greed, be it for material things, lust, etc., as long as we are never content, never satisfied, we are never going to be happy. As long as we have feelings of anger, hatred towards other people, or even anger and hatred towards ourselves, again, you're not going to be happy. And similarly, if you are deluded, that means you are really living your life resisting all the changes, then you're going to be in a very, very stressed state. And they are called poisons because they corrode our mental and physical health. And more importantly, destroy your peace, destroy your happiness. So there are 2 options before us, brothers and sisters, in the Dhamma. If you want to be happy, there are just these 2 options. One option is to change the nature of the world to suit our desires. For example, if it's a very warm day, well, switch on the aircon. That's one way. That is something we can do. But there are many, many things that we cannot do anything about. COVID-19, for example, is now really giving us a lot of physical, psychological stress. All right? There's only that much we can do. So the other option is to change ourselves to be in harmony with the nature of the world. Remember what I shared with you just now about the Chinese word for Dhamma, for Fa. Fa. On the left-hand side, 3 drops of water. On the right-hand side, going out. You flow like water. Don't resist, but adapt to it. And that is the second option, which although difficult, but is the option that we need to develop. Because the first option is simply not possible all the time. So life can be very happy if you have the right attitude. It need not be life is suffering. You can be positive and optimistic. So when you have insight into the realities of life, when you do not cling to the impossible, what that cannot be clung to, then you can live every moment happily and well. For example, if you look at this cookie jar is impermanent. It will break one day. It will die one day. It will create a state whereby you will need to get a new cookie jar. So, if we are mentally prepared for that, when the cookie jar breaks, it's no big deal. We will buy another cookie jar or replace it or put it into another container. But if you're attached to this cookie jar and say, oh no, I can only use this one and only cookie jar because my mother gave this cookie jar to me, then you're going to create through the first and second noble truths, through tanha, through upadana, a lot of pain and suffering. So the Buddha tells us, know the realities of life, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So while we're using this cookie jar, enjoy every moment that you use it, because one day it's going to break. And when it breaks, we accept it and we go on. So there are many levels of happiness, brothers and sisters, in the Dhamma. Now, I'm sure most of us are familiar with the statement Nibbanam Paramam Sukham, which means that Nibbana is the highest happiness. Now, the very fact that the Buddha taught us Nibbana Paramam Sukham tells us that that is the highest level of happiness, which means that there are many, many other levels of happiness below this highest level of Nibbanic happiness. Now, as a matter of fact, the Buddha never denied about the mundane happiness of sensual indulgence or sensual gratification. In fact, the Buddha cautioned us that if you are addicted or craving or attached to sensual indulgence, it is going to be very difficult for you to proceed in this path. So the Buddha denies that sensual indulgence can be the means to Nibbana or awakening. It is not through the lower that the higher is attained. It is only through the higher that the higher can be attained. So physical suffering is inevitable, brothers and sisters, in the Dhamma. As long as we have this physical body, as long as we are in relationships, as long as we associate and dissociate, there will be stress and distress while you walk this path. But as long as we understand the first and noble truth and the second noble truth about upadana and tanha, attachment and cravings, then you can progressively lessen that mental suffering until possibly one day that mental suffering, like the Buddha's mental suffering, is completely gone. So I used to have this t-shirt, it's very old now and no more with me. And it says Buddhism, where suffering is optional. And of course, people will ask, and then you have an opportunity to discuss or share. Now, the Buddha gave us advice for us lay people as to how we can be very happy in this life. So these are the conditions for lay people which are conducive to happiness in this life. And the first, of course, is accomplishment in effort. Please have an education, acquire a skill, develop a profession, a righteous way of earning a living, righteous wealth, honest efforts to earn your living. And then, with the strength of your arm, sweat of your brow, you earn, you carry out your work systematically and efficiently. And second, whatever righteous wealth you have earned, the Buddha even advises, see that it is properly guarded and protected. Good companionship and friendship, kalyana mitra, is very, very important. I cannot understate this. And when the Venerable Ananda stated to the Buddha that kalyana mitra, or noble or spiritual friendship, is half the spiritual life, the Buddha corrected Ananda and said, no, kalyana mitra, or noble spiritual friendship, is your entire spiritual life. This is very important. If you are alone, sometimes you will walk the path wrongly or make wrong decisions, or simply be depressed, discouraged. But when you have good spiritual friends, they are like pillars that support us. So it's very important that we associate and cultivate friendship with people who are virtuous, who are wise, who are not jealous, who are not petty, who are faithful, charitable, etc. Because they gives you, they provide you, they pull you up and give you lots of conditions whereby you will be happy in this life. And of course, the Buddha balanced it by saying you need to live a balanced life. You can spend your righteous wealth for the happiness of your family, make them comfortable. And the Buddha said you must be like a goldsmith who knows how to handle that balance. Not too much of either. And then you will have a very happy life. Now, when you are secure financially, when you are healthy, when you're morally upright, when you are generous with your time, with your skill, with finance, and you have a family and good spiritual friends, you can be very, very happy indeed. And I am sure many among the people who are now listening to me are similarly very happy because they have such conditions. Now, multiple choice question. The path to the highest happiness, or Nibbana. So now we are all walking this path. If not, you will not be listening to this sharing tonight. The fact that you are listening to this sharing means you are interested, means you have seen dukkha, and you want to lessen your dukkha. You want to seek for happiness. So is the path to this highest happiness through suffering or happiness? Remember the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse of the Buddha. The answer is the path to highest happiness is also true happiness, not through suffering. Why? Remember the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse of the Buddha. The very first teaching in the first discourse is not the Four Noble Truths. It's not the Eightfold Path. The very first teaching in this first discourse is the middle path. The Buddha taught us avoid the extreme of sensual indulgence and also most certainly avoid the extreme of self-mortification. Sometimes we forget this very important teaching of the Buddha. The Eightfold Path is a path that leads to progressively more and more happiness, not more and more suffering. Certainly, if life is dukkha, if life is completely suffering, then there is no hope for us. But it is not. You will progressively become more happy as you walk this path. So this path is to be trodden with joy. And every time I go to share in Seremban at Sudama, I go to Singapore to Buddhist Fellowship, I go to KL and Nalanda, I go to Sakya Inn in Malacca, we're very, very happy because we meet up with friends, we have fellowship, we have a good meal, and we celebrate the beauty of the Dhamma. So the Buddha described the Noble Eightfold Path as the path to be trodden or walked with joy. It does not involve suffering, vexation, despair, and anguish. And those of us who are walking this path, we are fortunate. We are peaceful. In fact, we are auspicious. So, brothers and sisters, in walking this path, are you more happy? You should be. Are you less stressed? You should be. If you are not getting happier, if you find that in walking this path, you're even more stressed, then something is not right. Now, there was a Chan master, and he was given a hand fan, the Chinese hand fan. And it was made from a rhinoceros horn by the governor of the district. Surely it is very precious and delicate. But he did not make much of it, and he put it casually in his room. Now there was a day which was particularly hot, and so he asked his attendant, "Can you please go to the room and fetch the fan?" So, well, that is what the attendant did. He went to the room, looked for the fan, and came back reporting, "The fan is broken, smashed by the weight of books placed on it." "Well," the master said, "in that case, bring me the rhinoceros." And here you have a little image made of a man sitting, a Chan master sitting on a rhinoceros to remind you of this very important lesson. And a student who was just observing this conversation, in fact, had an awakening. Now, as I always tease Sister Liming, it is now time to take a break and let Sister Liming go meditate on this for 3 months and come back and tell me her impression. But unfortunately, now in this era of instant information technology, she expects the answer immediately. What does this conversation, which in all honesty sounds quite nonsensical, teach us? The fan is very valuable and precious, especially now in this hot weather. In the hot weather, it was indispensable. Remember, there was no aircon then. And so to most people, our happiness would depend on that fan relieving the heat, making us comfortable. We are all like that. Our happiness depends on a lot of things, without which we are despondent. But this precious, valued fan is broken, gone, smashed. To most of us, that is unhappiness. We are going to wallow in pity and say, "Oh, the heat, the heat." But the Chan master, in fact, said, "Bring me the rhinoceros." Now, this is not only illogical, but impossible too. And of course, if ever done, dangerous. And frankly, the conversation is moronic. So what does it mean? What does it teach us with regards to what I have been sharing this evening? The master had asked for the impossible, compassionately teaching us that our happiness need not depend on the conditions that we had set. Many a times that is impossible, as in the broken fan. It is irretrievably smashed. Asking for the rhinoceros here represents accepting the impossible, living with the worst case scenario, the rhinoceros in the room. A situation whereby most would take as supremely unacceptable and unhappy, and yet living well, contented and happy within that context. Brothers and sisters, I hope you understand this sharing here. When he said, "Bring me the rhinoceros," it means let us accept the situation as it is. It is not good, but we need not be unhappy. We can still live with this worst case scenario, the rhinoceros in the room. A situation which is uncomfortable, unhappy for most, but yet for someone with the right attitude, his mind, like water flowing around rocks, he does not create resistance or meet with resistance. He is contented and happy, even within that context. So many of us would need this little statuary on our table to remind us. And Sister Liming, if you do come across this in an antique shop, buy it immediately. So this requires a paradigm shift in our attitude and our thinking. For to most, if not all of us, Our happiness is typically dependent on what we have. Now, the paradigm shift is to be happy even when you do not have. And in even difficult situations, simply with a change in our outlook. And you may now understand why, to so many people, the historical Chan masters appear a bit odd and possibly even mad, as their approach to life radically differs from the general population. Now, I bring us back again to the first and second noble truth. In the first noble truth, remember, the summary of dukkha is pancha upadana khandha dukkha. Pancha is 5. Upadana is what we grasp, what we cling, what we attach to and not let go. Khandha is our aggregates, which is the means in which we perceive our world and ourselves and note this is what, this is form, this is feeling, this is thought. As long as we grasp onto that, you are going to suffer because all those things change. They are non-self. They are kong. They will change with time. And to grasp onto something which cannot be grasped will only give rise to mental dis-ease. The second noble truth is craving. You haven't had it yet, but you crave for it. Tanha is an emotion. That is going to create also a state of discontentment. We are not going to be happy as long as you want something. If you do not have it, you're not going to be happy. So this rhinoceros horn story tells us, if I crave, I insist, must have an aircon, must have a fan, then I'm going to be unhappy. If I have an aircon, if I have a fan, fine, use it by all means. But now we don't have it. Don't moan, don't groan. We can still live happy. So this is an important lesson for both upadana, what you have, but you cannot grasp onto, and craving, what you have not have, but you may not get. And as long as you crave, you're going to create discontentment, dis-ease, dukkha. A lot of us grasp onto things which cannot be possibly grasped onto. One of the most common things I find when I see a lot of patients who are elderly and they come in and we chit-chat, and they often will share a story of this old lady or of this elderly patient, female most of the time, who is complaining to me about, oh, my daughter-in-law is like that, like that, like that. How come she is not like that, like that, like that? And she is unhappy. So I used to explain to them that you were raised, auntie, in a different culture, a different time, a different environment. Your daughter-in-law is raised in a different culture, a different education, a different environment. It is impossible that she will be like you. If you insist that she must be like you, then everybody suffers. Everybody has dukkha. You have dukkha, she has dukkha. Because you are attaching to the impossible. Or vice versa, they will come and tell me, oh, my son, he has changed. He's like that, like that, like that. He wasn't like that when he was a child, blah, 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 blah. And people say, oh, how I wish he was young, cute, like he was young. And I always tell them, please, never, never, never make that wish. Never. You know how many autistic children are stuck at the age of 12, 13, 14, never growing beyond that? Would you want that? He's an adult, but he's still a 13-year-old mind. You wouldn't want that because we all change. So if they complain to me, oh, my son, oh dear, he has changed and all that, now he's become like that and like that. He doesn't come to mommy anymore. He goes to his wife or his girlfriend for everything. And I said, well, that is life. You cannot attach to the impossible. Your son will change. If you insist that he be like that 11-year-old child, you are going to suffer. He's going to suffer. Everybody is going to suffer. You must be like water flowing around the rocks. You cannot attach onto what is impossible to grasp onto. So these all requires understanding of the Buddha's teachings, understanding of the realities of life which the Buddha has pointed out clearly to us, and changing our mental attitude. When we lessen the causes for dukkha, then dukkha will be less. When we create more conditions for dukkha, then dukkha will be there. So we can be very, very happy people with just a change in attitude. And this, of course, is an extreme example, a lesson. It may not even be true, but it is a lesson that was devised to illustrate to us this principle. So our emotions, both happy and angry ones, all arise within ourselves. Chitta, sukha chitta, dukkha chitta. Happy, sukha chitta. Unhappy, dukkha chitta. They all arise within ourselves. It is an emotion which arose because of the cause. Something gave rise to it, condition, and of course the effect. But it need not be me or you. It need not be my emotion unless you allow it to be. So there is suffering. It's very different from I am suffering. And very often there is discomfort. But we own that discomfort. We make it worse by saying, we have put in. So that's why we often say, your knee may be painful. You just know it as pain. Do not own that pain, because now you have shot yourself with two arrows. One, the arrow of the physical pain, and the second arrow straight in your brain. We always say, as the Buddha taught us, the first arrow is inevitable because aging, sickness, decay is inevitable. But the second arrow, you have a choice. This is, of course, the original story, illustrated with a broken fan. So I want to end here. We took the 5 precepts just now. Now, if you walked into a traditional center, an old temple, you will very often see a Buddha image on either the left or the right, or sometimes on both left and right, with the hand placed in this position, like that. Oops. Or sometimes like that. Okay? And often on both sides of the doors, or sometimes in the main shrine hall. The hand placed like that. This we call the Abhaya posture, the posture of fearlessness. And if you tell a young man, like one of my students, oh, this is the Buddha mudra of Abhaya, of fearlessness. Well, a young, intelligent, inquisitive mind will ask, how does a bronze image with a hand like that create fearlessness? How does a bronze or stone or wooden image standing in Burma create fearlessness, Abhaya? My answer to them is very simple. This is Abhaya. This is the classical mudra whereby people associate with protection so that you're no longer fearful. All right? And I always tell them, what is the Buddha trying to teach you? What is the maker of that image, of that mudra trying to teach you? If you do not want to be fearful, if you do not want to have fear, conscience, something wrong, fear of a consequence, fear of a future, what the Buddha is telling you in that mudra is keep the 5 precepts. Because in keeping the 5 precepts, you're actually protecting yourself. Keep the 5 precepts. You are actually protecting yourself from lust and greed and the consequences of lust and greed. The consequence is going to give you hiri or tapa, conscience, and fear of the consequences. And very often being unenlightened people, our chitta, our emotions overrule our intellect. Our intellect is not strong enough, not that well developed yet, to say no to our emotions. And so when these emotions overrule our intellect, we act in many ways which are inappropriate. Greed, alcohol, lust, you name it, it all comes in. And then we suffer the conscience and the consequences. So if you do not want to have a fearful life, if you want to have a happy life, as I shared earlier, even just keeping these 5 precepts, you will have Abhaya. You'll be freed from fear, freed from a bad conscience, freed from a fear of the consequence of your action. Abhaya. Abhaya, the mudra of protection in the 5 precepts that you and I have just chanted that we will keep. I want to end here. I want to thank Sister Li Ming for being the MC for all the 4 sessions. I want to thank Subhanjaya Buddhist Association for inviting me to share. The number of views that we had in the Facebook had been very, very encouraging. 2,400 views for the last talk, Breaking Myths number 3, is certainly very encouraging for me as someone who is sharing the Dhamma. I will take a break, as I insisted to the organizers that other speakers must be coming to share, because we want to develop other speakers. We want to encourage other people to share. So later on, I will come back and we will continue. Those of you who wish to have a copy of the book, the hard copy, which will be launched on October 18, do contact Subhanjaya. We will send copies to them. Those of you who cannot wait and you want to have an e-copy, the e-copy version is slightly different from the hard copy version, of course. The e-copy version I have already sent to the organizers at Subhanjaya. So once again, I want to seek forgiveness if I had offended you all in any way. I wish to say I've been most happy in the last 1 month that I shared, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity to do something that I love and which I can serve the Sasana. Thank you. Sadhu.
Right, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Dr. Punya. Such an amazing Dharma sharing session tonight. I've personally always found Dr. Punya's talk very captivating, because instead of giving us the direct solutions to an issue, he makes us ponder on that and then correcting our wrong views along the way that we may have by breaking the myths. Yeah, and then eventually leading us to finding the truth, which is exactly what the Buddha has taught us. Yeah, calling that ehi-pasiko. Right, so it's time for the Q&A session now, where we will take in questions from our viewers to be answered by Dr. Punya. So you can post your questions on the comment box, and we will pick the questions from there. Right, I think we have a first question from Brother Leong Yu Ming. His question is that during Dhamma talks by some of the Sangha members, they also emphasize that life is suffering. So in this scenario, how can we lay people as Putujana respectfully and humbly rephrase the phrase that Bhante has shared? Yeah.
Brother Leong, I don't think that you and I are in a position, because in our culture, you'll be considered as rude. In our culture, this would be not considered as acceptable. And I'm so sorry to say this, but some very senior members of Subhanjaya Buddhist Association will get very angry with you if you try. Because in our culture, we defer to the venerables. But as long as you understand, and it's not just that 1 or 2 venerable, you just look at the internet, it's all over the internet. It is so much in our common consciousness that to make a statement against it is actually pushing against the tide. But I think that it is important for every one of us to understand at an individual level. That is more important. And this statement of life is suffering, if you just Google search, you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of sites which will give you the same short statement. But as I said, this, among many others, is actually in the common consciousness of the Buddha Sasana now. Another one which is very common is all that I teach is suffering and the end of suffering. I mentioned that in another one of the Breaking Myths series. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, who translated many of our Nikayas, he himself was one of those who actually translated that statement as all that I teach is suffering and the end of suffering. But he realized it was an error. And he was such a good man, he actually openly admitted, he apologized that he made such a boo-boo. And he pointed out that the Pali actually does not say that. And then almost very quickly after that, Ajahn Sujato similarly wrote and said, yes, when I look at that statement, I also realized that I also made an error. Certainly, that is not what the Buddha meant. And so in their correction, which was printed out in the Tricycle magazine, they actually pointed out that this is another common boo-boo that is part of our common consciousness. So, Brother Leong, as long as you understand, I understand, Li Ming understand, and the others in the audience understand, I think we are doing a very good job. I do not think that we are in a position to put out our hands and say, you know, Bante, Dr. Wong said, then I'll never ever get invited to Subanjaya for the rest of my life. We, in our culture, are not supposed to do that. But I have to say that in a Western context, they will actually put up their hands and point it out to the whoever is speaking. But we have to respect our culture. And so I would say, let us make sure that we understand. That is the most important. All right?
Right, thank you.
Sorry, some of them are referring to the word dukkha. I mean, they are saying that life has dukkha. But many of them, you know, may have issues directly translating. So they translate it as life as suffering. Okay? Right. Sorry, Ling.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I have actually another question. It's quite interesting. Where do we actually feel dukkha? Is it the chitta or the body?
Well, dukkha is felt in both the physical body as physical pain. That's why the Buddha said most of us are shot with 2 arrows. One arrow is the arrow that is shot at our body. Your painful knee, your menstrual cramp every month, your migraine headache. That is the first arrow. And that is a physical pain. Even the Buddha had backache. You will read Mahaparinibbana Sutta and you will see the Buddha complaining that he had painful back. And, you know, he had to sit against a beam. He had to let the sun shine on the back of his the back of his body for the heat to relieve his pain. So even the Buddha cannot escape the pain of a degenerating body. The second pain, the pain that is there, is what is optional. And that is what the Buddha said. You need not be shot by the second arrow. And the Buddha went on to say that a well-trained student will only be shot by the first arrow, not the second. While someone who is not well-trained will not only have the first arrow, he will immediately have the second arrow, just as we said, we have pain in the knee, then we say, my knee is painful. We have owned it, we have made it now. Even worse, my pain. When in meditation, you will be taught to just recognize it as pain, just a phenomena which arose because of cause, condition, and effect. Don't own it, don't make it my pain. Ajahn Brahm used to teach us, there is suffering, not I am suffering. If you say, I am suffering, you would have made it much, much worse. But just recognize it as there is pain, there is distress, there's abdominal cramp, whatever. Not I have pain, I have suffering. Because then certainly you'll be shot by the 2 arrows.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so some people, just another question, yeah. Some people, they have always perceived that their life is all suffering, yeah. It's just their own perception. But when in fact, if you look at it from the third party, their life is not that bad after all, right? So one way is to encourage them to count more of their blessings. So what is the best way for them to adopt, yeah, to constantly remind them how to count their blessings?
Go to Subanjaya Buddhist Association. That's one. Second, go and help. I mean, I'm a doctor. Every week I go to the hospital. You just look at these people in the hospital and you realize how blessed you are. All right? Go to a dialysis center. Now, of course, there's a problem because of COVID-19. I used to tell my medical students, you want to see hell? I said, go to a dialysis center. You will see hell. You know, I used to help out at the dialysis center a long time ago. And you have patients who have been on dialysis for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. And when you walk in, the poor old lady will look at you and say, Yi sang ah, just paying us say la, don't do anything la, just paying us say la. I always say, you know, you want to see hell, go to a dialysis center. 3 times a week, they're stuck there for 4 hours. First year is okay, second year is okay. By the 8th, 9th year, they have no reason to go on. So hell, heaven is in our mind, as I've shared many a times. Some people, I am so sad to say, are literally in hell. They perceive only suffering all the time. Or some people, maybe living, is always in heaven because they're always so happy. And another time story, since we are ahead of time, there was this samurai, fierce man, huge man, who would kill a man without a blink of his eye. And he saw in this village this very famous Chan master who's supposed to be very wise. And he was meditating. So the samurai went there and asked the Chan master, you are supposed to be very wise. Tell me, what is heaven? What is hell? Chan master looked at the samurai and he said, a stupid samurai like you wouldn't understand what is heaven and what is hell. Samurais are not accustomed to be insulted. So he got very angry and he told the master, I give you one more chance. I'm going to ask you politely, what is hell and what is heaven? If you insult me, I'll chop off your head with one strike of my sword. The master looked at him and said, that rusty sword, you cannot even jamjiyok with it. And so the master was really trying to poke him, irritate him. And the samurai drew out his sword and going to raise it up to strike the master's head. And the master looked up at him and said, that samurai is hell. Samurai, when he saw that, when he heard that question, he had the insight and he understood. He placed his knife on the ground, his sword on the ground, and bowed down with his head to the floor in gratitude. And the master looked at the samurai and said, Samurai, that, he said, is heaven. So do you understand again this moral of this story? Heaven and hell is created by our own minds. So yes, there are some people who are very negative and perhaps very unhappy most times. They are in hell. They are in hell. And other people are very happy most times. They are in heaven. And for most of us, we are in a mixture of heaven and hell all the time. That's why we are humans. So, brothers, what you mentioned just now, Sister Liming mentioned just now, yes, I'm so sorry. There are some people who are very negative. They are always in hell. And that is where we must come in and try and help them and bring them out to at least the human realm, if not the heavenly realms. Okay, Sister Liming?
Thank you. Let them appreciate what their life is all about. Yes, I think due to time constraint, we'll take one last question, by our SJBA president, Brother Chim. He actually asked if someone has actually been practicing diligently for years, many years, what he has actually learned from Buddhism, and yet they still have a lot of unhappiness in them. So what is the best way, based on the Buddha's teaching, to lead him or her to a happier life?
Okay. Brother Chim, you always give me the most difficult question at the end. I'm going to charge you more Hokkien Mee when I come to KL. Now, you know, the Buddha said his training is dana, sila, bhavana. The 3 steps: dana, generosity; sila, moral precepts; and bhavana, training the mind. Bhavana is not meditation. A lot of people translate bhavana as meditation. Again, that's another myth. Bhavana literally means to develop the mind. So your metta bhavana, develop the mind in metta. Your samadhi bhavana, develop the mind in calmness or stillness. You could vipassana bhavana, develop the mind in insight. So it's a 3-step training of dana, sila, bhavana. And here you're telling me that this person is supposed to have studied the Buddha Dharma for many years, and yet he's very unhappy. So something is not right, isn't it? Because the Buddha has certainly pointed out to us that when you walk this Noble Eightfold Path, you will become progressively more happy based on what I had shared just now. Now, something is wrong. This person is not doing it right. Somewhere along the way, he has got it wrong. And I would say that in a situation like that, I think one of the ways of making him very happy is, of course, find out first and foremost whether there are any obvious stresses in his life which is making him happy. Sometimes there is. It's something so obvious as a bad marriage, or something so obvious as a problem child or a problem parent or something like that. So in those situations, he has to be like water and go around the rock now. Okay, you simply cannot resist it. You have to be like water to go around the rock. So let's say there isn't that situation, and we still say, okay, he has it all good, but why is he still so unhappy? And personally, I find that in a context like that, a very good way is to bring him to Burma. Let him see all the poor orphans, all the poor people, and there are so many in Burma. Bring him to one of the rural areas. You see the monasteries, which are in little huts and things like that, and there do dana. Just the very first step of the Buddhist teachings, dana. Helping those people, and in that situation, really helping them. Like, for example, go to an orphanage, you look at the food they eat, you'll be shocked. Sponsor a meal, 2 meals, 3 meals, and you're actually there when the meals are cooked. See that food that you have sponsored being served to the children. Let the children eat that food with you sitting among them, and you really feel the joy of what the Buddha meant when he said, you do this and you will feel happy. Now, many of us have personally done this. We had actually gone there, actually sat with the orphans and ate a meal. And you feel good as a human that you have done something worthy, that you had actually helped another human being. Now, okay, so the guy said, I don't want to go to Burma, it's too far. Well, before COVID-19, we also have a lot of nursing homes, old folks' homes, etc. in Malaysia that you can help out with and actually feel good helping those people. But what I mean is that in this path, the very starting point that the Buddha taught us is dana. And after that, sila. Sila I have explained in detail. Dana, perhaps I didn't share so much. But you will have the immediate effect of joy when you do it. Most of us would have experienced this. So with regards to why is he still unhappy, it's impossible for me to answer that question because there are so many variables which we are all not aware of. But let us try and solve his problem, look for the obvious, and then do like what the Buddha said, dana, sila, bhavana. Okay? Brother Chim?
Right. Thank you for the clarification. So I think that's all for our Q&A session. Very interesting session indeed. So our myth buster now, we call you myth buster, yeah, Dr. Wong. Just busted our myth on all life is all suffering tonight. So remember, there's suffering in life, but not life is suffering. Okay. So another point that I just wanted to add is, I remember what Didi Huat Chai has always emphasized in the GLAD program that he facilitates, is that suffering is actually optional, but happiness is a choice. So a change in our attitude, we can actually choose to lead a very positive and happy life indeed. Right? So thank you for all the questions posted tonight, yeah, and to Dr. Punya once again, and let us rejoice together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And with that, I shall now hand over to Brother Chuan for the closing of tonight's session. Thank you, everyone.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Dr. Punna Wong. First, I must say that thank you for accepting our invitation to share the Dharma to all of us, to everyone on the team Breaking Myths, which is very pertinent to us, I must say. We have learned a lot in the Q&A session this evening. Again, brothers and sisters, please help me to thank the speaker, Dr. Punna Wong, and also to our moderator, Sister Li Ming, and not forgetting our technical team who are behind the scene. So a good thanks to everyone. Brothers and sisters, to be grateful that we are able to listen to this Dharma sharing with a calm mind, and we have taken the 3 refuges and observed the 5 precepts, listening to the Dharma sharing with the wholesome thoughts. Let us dedicate the merits we had accrued to our departed relatives, friends, and to all sentient beings, and may they rejoice of our good merits. Sharing of merits. Imang no punya bagang mata pitunancha acharyanancha sabha satanancha sabha mitanancha sabha nyatinancha sabha petanancha sabha devatanancha vajema imang no punya bagang sabha satanang dema sabbe satha sukita hontu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Brothers and sisters, let me pay homage to the Triple Gem. Buddhang bujemi, Dhammang bujemi, Sanghang bujemi. Sukhi Hontu. Brothers and sisters, let's plant good seeds today for tomorrow's fruit. Another round of enlightening, inspiring Dharma sharing. This Dharma sharing, which is definitely challenging our mind. If you are watching from outside Malaysia, please let us know. We'll be taking a break next week, Friday, 9th October, as Subang Jaya Buddhist Association will be having the online Katina on Sunday, 11 October. If you are interested to contribute or allow us to offer robes or requisites on your behalf, please look for the information in our Facebook. The next Friday, Dharma sharing will be on Friday, 16th October, same time, 8:30 p.m. by another speaker. It will be giving us time to recall, examine, and rejuvenate. Visit Subang Jaya Buddhist Association Facebook for all the previous Dharma sharing. Follow our Facebook to see our posters for the information on the next Dharma sharing. Remember to share the Dharma sharing posters with your families, relatives, and friends. So before I say good night, may you, your families, relatives, and friends be well, happy, and free from suffering. During this COVID-19 pandemic, be safe, stay home. Thank you for joining us. See you on Friday, 16 October, 8:30 p.m. Good night. Sabbe Sata Sukita Hontu. Bye.
Bahung sahan semabhinim mitesayudantang ngirimi kelang uditagora sasene marang dana di dhamma vidina